Welcome to Moundsville, West Virginia, home of the former West Virginia State Penitentary. After being built in the height of the American Civil War, after becoming a part of the United States Department of Justice's top 10 most violent correctional facilities, after riots, prison breaks, murders, and executions, this prison was left only to be lost and forgotten. 1863. This is the year that West Virginia seceded from the Confederacy and Virginia during the American Civil War, and where the beginning of this prison's history begins. With this secession, the new state lacked many public institutions, such as prisons. This is when the idea of this penitentiary and many others came to light. A temporary prison had to be built while the new penitentiary was being constructed. Offenders in this temporary prison would often help build this penitentiary. Construction continued until the doors to the West Virginia State Penitentiary could finally open in 1876. From this point to the beginning of the 20th century, everything seemed to be going smoothly. As the years went by, materials, food, and clothing were improved. Select inmates were given jobs like many other prisons. They even had a prison coal mine that was opened in 1921, where prisoners could mine for coal that supplied the prison's energy needs. Despite this, the prison had a darker side. Its most infamous location was called the Sugar Shack, where gambling, fights, and rape took place. This location is one of the main reasons that this prison was put on the U.S. Department of Justice's top 10 most violent correctional facilities list. Throughout the prison's history, 36 homicides took place, one of which was that of R.D. Wall, who was attacked after snitching on one of the other inmates in 1929. He was attacked while going to the boiler room by 3 people. He was stabbed several times with dull shivs. After the attack, Wall was left for dead. From 1899 to 1959, 94 people were executed within the facility, 85 of which were executed by hanging. Most of the executions at this time period were open to the public, but that changed on June 19, 1931. On this date, a man by the name of Frank Heyer was to be executed for murdering his wife. However, when the trapdoor opened and his weight settled onto the noose, he was instantly decapitated. After this event, hangings could only be attended with an invitation only. The electric chair took the noose's place in 1951 as the prison's main form of execution. Its nickname was Old Sparky, and it was built by an inmate at the prison. Only 9 people were executed by the chair though, before 1965 when the state started prohibiting capital punishment. In November of 1979, 15 prisoners escaped, one of which was Ronald Turney Williams, an inmate incarcerated for murdering a police officer. After making his escape, Williams found an off-duty police officer. He pulled him from his car and shot him with a gun that he stole from the prison. Williams remained at large for over 18 months, despite sending taunting letters to investigators and even making the FBI's 10 most wanted list. He was eventually arrested again in New York City in 1981. He was returned to West Virginia where he faced numerous charges and life sentences. The attempt was made to extradite him to Arizona for execution, but Williams still remains in West Virginia custody. Another interesting fact about this prison, Charles Manson requested to move to this prison to be closer to family, but his request was denied. This leads to the end of this prison's life. Its peak capacity was reached in the 1960s at about 2,000 inmates, but throughout the 1980s and 90s, the population decreased to about 600 inmates. Ultimately, it had been through a tough history. A court order finally put the last nail in the coffin of this prison when the West Virginia Supreme Court ruled that the cells in this prison were too small. This constituted as cruel and unusual punishment, and the prison closed on March 27, 1995. All the inmates were moved to a nearby correctional facility, and a much smaller regional jail was built to take its place. However, the prison wasn't demolished or left to become ruins, but in September of 1996, the jail was added to the National Register of Historic Places. It currently is a tourist location where you can step back into the past and know what it would have been like to be a prisoner that called the West Virginia State Penitentiary home.